Regulars to this channel probably know that I play on a regular 33-inch card table. Square. I don't see this changing, as nothing bigger will really fit in my house without removing furniture, and honestly it doesn't usually bother me. You might remember that this is one of the things from my deal breakers video, and really, sometimes it's just an easy way to eliminate games that I'm iffy about. And a lot of expensive games at that. Most of the time, they just flow past and I never miss them. I think that anybody who's paid attention to crowdfunding in the board game space probably has had the same feeling where you completely forget a game exists, um, and even though you might have been agonizing about the decision of whether to purchase it or not. Which means that FOMO is usually a lie. After the fact, I rarely feel that I mowed. I don't even remember most of the campaigns. But some few games do stick with me. Some of them that I pass by just because the board is too big to fit on my table, I think about and I lament my inability to table them. I'm J. Allen Riker, horror author, and solo board game fanatic. And these are the top 5 solo games that I wish fit on my table. The origin of the top 5 in this channel is that I couldn't do top 10 because I found that my top 5 videos usually push a half an hour, and I'm not expecting anybody to watch an hour-long top 10 video, and I would be exhausted after recording them. But I believe that this video may be an anomaly because I haven't actually played almost any of these games. I feel like I'll have very little to say about them, except that I'm sad that I don't own them. So this might be a quick one. We'll find out. My number 5 game that I wish could fit on my table is Cloudspire. Now this one is actually a special situation. I did not play the game, but let's say I am normally really good at paying attention to the size of a board game. Like I said, it's one of my deal breakers, and if I can't figure that out, I will ask the publishers during, say, a Kickstarter campaign, or I will ask on Board Game Geek if it's a game that's already out in the games forums, because I just need to know. It can sometimes be surprisingly difficult to find out the size of a board. I feel like I'm the only person who has a small gaming table sometimes. And so in this case, I actually did purchase this game that won't fit on my table. And it's not a case of it just being a little too tight and frustrating. No, I bought the game, I opened it up, I tried to put together one of the scenario maps after suspecting from looking at the size of the modular neoprene board that it was not going to work. It did not work, and I packed it up and sold it all within a few days. I think that what threw me off is that it has the modular neoprene board, and modular boards are always difficult to tell because you can't just get a straight up objective answer of how big the board is. I think I looked at these hexes and did not think about the fact that they are sized for poker chips, which are much bigger than standard hexes. So I'm going to blame those two things together. It's not like I didn't know it was using poker chips, but I think that my subconscious mind didn't fully understand the ramifications when I was looking into the game. It looks like a very cool game. It looks like a very thinky game. I understand it's pretty difficult to learn and can consistently kind of stay difficult to learn because its factions are so asymmetrical. But then again, asymmetrical factions are one of my favorite things because that type of variety drives up the replay value. But it is not meant to be. So let's move on to the first game on the list, which I didn't actually purchase in physical form. And that is my number 4 game that I wish would fit on my table, Mage Knight. Mage Knight is like the all-time classic solo game. It is many people's top solo game of all time. It is an overland adventure hex crawl, words that I just absolutely love. It has deterministic combat, which I don't require, but which I do. I do like some deterministic games. Like I'll get in the mood where I want to really plot everything out. But luckily, because it's such a popular game, I've seen how many people like meticulously set things up, and even creating like custom card holders and board proppers and like magnetic boards so they can put them up on the wall to track things on them with magnets. And then with all this work, a lot of times they'll say, and now I can just barely fit Mage Knight on my 4 foot by 5 foot table. Yeah, so there's no chance. Don't even try to convince me. Um, I had never even played it, and I always wondered what I was missing out on just because it's so beloved. Then I discovered the PC game Paladin's Oath. If you look into the history of Paladin's Oath, it is not just a game that is similar to Mage Knight, it is a game that is completely based off of Mage Knight to create it as closely as possible, like for one man. There are a lot of interactions that apparently are so complex that some things had to be a little bit streamlined. But there have been issues with getting an actual official digital game made, and it doesn't seem like those issues are going to get cleared up anytime soon. And so, Paladin's Oath is basically the unofficial official Mage Knight board game. I've played it. I have enjoyed it. And if it were not for this game, then Mage Knight would be much higher up on this list. But I do have Paladin's Oath, and so Mage Knight is number 4. The number 3 game that I wish that I could fit on my gaming table is... It's kind of funny how I go is, like a game show host or something. It's like in my subconscious. I don't. It's not attack. It's not a something I've ever thought about, but it's pretty silly when I just hear myself doing it. Anyway, number 3 game, Silver Coin, Age of Monster Hunters. There is another game called Silver Coin, so you do have to specify Age of Monster Hunters. So I remember watching the room and board coverage of this game, and even though Chris George and I don't share a ton of overlap, just the way that he described this game, it really sounded like something that I would enjoy. It's just you can see a big old overland adventure game. It's more abstracted than the hex crawl, but then you can also see how it has a ton of other stuff that sits outside of the board space, because the board is the map, but then there are a lot of, my understanding is that there are a lot of mechanisms that are like kind of like these little mini games that represent different aspects of the monster hunting experience. That sounds like it could really keep things from getting stale. Like if it works, it sounds like it could be a disjointed mess, but it also, I'm trusting what I've heard in that it goes together, and it makes just for a varied experience. And I love Monster Hunter, the video game series, and any board games that have a monster hunting theme really attract me. I think actually probably I love the monster hunting theme, and then Monster Hunter is just a really fantastic implementation of that theme with the weighty seeming combat and the epic battles. And so yeah, this game I definitely absolutely would have backed this game if it were not for the size of the board. The board's largest dimension is 90 centimeters or 35.5 inches. And of course, there are these other components where there's no way to fit them on the board. They have to go around it. Now, could I make it work with my tray table? With the 2.5 inches isn't a huge amount of overhang, but I will say that it keeps my anxiety high, that if someone walks by quickly, and if you have children in the house, you know that that does happen, and snags the corner of the board as they go by, this expensive game would go flying with all of its components. So 2.5 inches is enough to worry about. I've also found that trying to make things fit literally makes my temperature go up. I end up taking up my jacket and turning on the fan, and I just generally feel frustrated. And that feeling leaks over onto my opinion of the game. Um, is one of the reasons why Witcher Old World didn't land with me. Was constantly reaching way across the board to swap out a bunch of things, and this board just barely fit on my table in the first place. So I ended up selling it. Still, I have to say that Silver Coin Age of Monster Hunters, it it does haunt me to this day. I think about it. I actually just unsubscribed from the email telling me to add my address to get my rewards because I backed it for $1. Anyway, let's move on to even sadder tales because as this list continues, it's games that make me sadder that I don't own. So we're moving to my number 2 game that I wish would fit on my table. That is Fallen Land, a post-apocalyptic board game. So this game had a recent Kickstarter. I think I think it already is freely available at retail. I'm not 100% sure about that because I don't look deeply into it because the giant board won't fit on my table. I was unable to quickly find the dimensions of the board, and I wasn't willing to spend a lot of time on it. If I remember correctly, it's about 36 inches at its largest dimension, which is width. And then you can see it just has tons and tons of cards. And I'm going to tell you what, it's those beautiful stacks of cards that haunt me. Like they're one of the reasons it won't fit on my table, and yet it's also the reason that I want the game the most because those cards, from my understanding, are just absolutely packed full of varied adventure. And that is one of my favorite ways to get content in these sort of adventure games is to just have a ton of cards with little adventures on them. I am not obsessed with post-apocalyptic themes across all mediums, but I really do love adventuring in post-apocalyptic worlds in board games. But it was not meant to be, so I play other post-apocalyptic games which do fit on my table and try not to think too much about Fallen Land. So that brings us to the number 1 game that I most wish would fit on my table, and this one doesn't even come close. It's like I agonize over it just because I would like the look of the game so much, but there's absolutely no trying to make it work. And that is Uprising, Curse of the Last Emperor. I was really closely following the expansion campaign, and because it doesn't look that gigantic. I think because of the sizes of the hexes, I think similar to the way that Cloudspire tricked me. This beauty of a game is 45 inches across. That's wild. That's not even close. That's a full foot wider than my game table. Some of the things that I like about this game is I like that it is solo and co-op only. That always makes it feel like the people who made the game were excited to make a compelling, solo co-op experience out of the gate. Like they were excited about their idea, not that they were excited about the multiplayer and then they made a solo mode to add on to it. And it could be a good solo mode, but like when you've got the passion just based in that solo, it makes me believe a little bit more, especially in a 4X game, which are pretty uncommon still solo because of the difficulties of controlling an AI on a board where there are lots of kind of decision factors. The game sounds really brutally challenging, but especially with the expansions, it sounds like there are a lot of ways to mitigate the difficulty, which I always appreciate. There are a variety of different factions. As I already said earlier in this video, that's a sure way to get my attention. And then I love the fact that they're supporting the game. And so you know that once, even if you play it until the game gets stale, that it's not going to be long until some more factions come out to uh, refresh the whole experience. And really, what caught my eye at first is just the look of the game. It doesn't look like your standard fantasy game. I absolutely love the colors. I love the standees. It's just so bright and looks like nothing that I own. And if you watched my unique fantasy art video, then you know that that will draw me in. Like this is the sort of game where honestly I would just like to sit and look at it on my table. But this game isn't even close to being able to sit on my table. So that is not something that I will be doing. Okay, so that's it. Those were the top 5 games that make me sad that I don't have a bigger gaming table. Does anybody else out there face this same conundrum every time they look into a game? Are there games that are too big for your setup, basically? Can you fit the campaign for North Africa on your table? Shown here with a small human for scale. How far are you willing to reach across the table? I know some people who will play with a really wide board, but won't play with a deep board. I have long arms. I'm 6'6", but I have to say, if I have to consistently reach across even my small game table, I do start to get frustrated, especially if I'm wearing sleeves and they start hitting things. But then I get so frustrated, like I said, I have to take my jacket off. So how about games you've avoided because the box is too big? I know a couple games that are getting republished in smaller boxes because the backlash against the amount of air that they were freighting in from China was kind of ridiculous. Like, can't fit in your calyx levels. Anyway, I'd like to hear about your thoughts in the comments. Otherwise, have a great rest of your day and keep gaming solo.